When Sarah Reynolds moved into Lakeside Pines, the HOA community seemed like the perfect retreat. The tree-lined sidewalks, neatly trimmed hedges, and polite smiles from neighbors gave the illusion of peace. For Sarah, a retired Army medic battling PTSD, it felt like a much-needed fresh start. Alongside her walked Titan, a massive German shepherd with a silver badge clipped to his harness. Medical Alert Service Animal. Federal ID 448291. Sarah wasn't looking for attention. In fact, she preferred to blend in. Titan wasn't just her companion, he was her lifeline. Trained to detect anxiety spikes, nightmares, and health episodes, he'd once saved her life during a flashback that left her unconscious near a stove. But not everyone appreciated Titan's presence. At the community's new resident welcome brunch, hosted at the HOA clubhouse, Sarah stepped in quietly. Titan at her side in full-service vest. People smiled stiffly. Eyes darted to the dog. But one woman in particular, blonde bob, pastel sweater, clipboard in hand, stared like she'd seen a cockroach in her wineglass. Margaret. The name tag on her chest read Margaret Ellington, HOA Compliance Chair. "Well, this is unusual," Margaret said, eyes narrowing on Titan. "We don't usually allow animals at HOA events. It's disruptive." "He's not a pet," Sarah replied evenly, holding her composure. "He's a federally registered service animal." Margaret scoffed, tapping her clipboard. "Still, we have rules. We like to maintain a peaceful, pet-free environment." "Then you might want to check federal law," Sarah replied coolly. "Because Titan has more right to be here than that Jell-O salad you brought." A few neighbors chuckled nervously. Margaret's smile thinned like melting ice. That was the moment something shifted. From that day on, Margaret made it her mission to make Sarah uncomfortable. It started subtly. The HOA monthly bulletin included a bold reminder about pet restrictions, highlighted in red oddly enough. Sarah received a welcome packet in her mailbox a week late. Unlike others, hers had handwritten annotations on dog policies. Titan wasn't mentioned by name, but Sarah knew a target when she saw one. Still, she ignored it. She had bigger concerns, rebuilding her life, healing. Titan helped her sleep, helped her breathe. She didn't want trouble. But Margaret was persistent and petty. Sarah began noticing small things. Sidewalk chalk messages scribbled by kids would disappear overnight, replaced by warnings like, "No dogs on grass." Her lawn was sprayed with a strange vinegar smell. Then, one morning, she found a typed letter in a plastic sheet protector, zip-tied to her porch railing. Notice of violation. As per HOA Article 6, Section 3, no domestic animals shall be kept or maintained in any unit or common area. Further infractions may result in fines. There was no signature, no contact info. Sarah stared at the letter, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from the cold fury of someone who knew what this was. That afternoon, she calmly walked Titan to the HOA mailbox center. Several neighbors turned to glance, quickly looking away. Margaret was there, pretending to water the landscaping. "Cute leash," she said, not looking up. Sarah didn't respond. But as she dropped her mail into the outgoing slot, she made sure Margaret saw what was inside. A certified letter, stamped and sealed, addressed to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. Margaret's face faltered, and in that split second, Sarah knew. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Sarah stepped outside with Titan at her side, leash clipped, vest secure, just as always. The air was calm, birds chirping, the kind of quiet suburban morning that should have felt peaceful. But today, it felt staged. As they walked down the pathway toward the community park, Sarah spotted it. A bright yellow paper duct-taped to the community bulletin board. HOA alert. All residents are reminded that animals, especially of a large or aggressive breed, must be kept indoors at all times unless otherwise permitted by HOA vote. Safety and neighborhood comfort take precedence over individual preferences. There were no signatures again. Titan stood silently beside her, ears twitching. He was trained to pick up changes in Sarah's heart rate, and her blood was starting to boil. Large or aggressive breed, she muttered. Real subtle, Margaret. It was clear now. Margaret wasn't just annoyed, she was launching a campaign. But what Sarah didn't know yet was how far Karen was willing to go. Later that afternoon, Sarah returned home from a therapy appointment. As she turned into her driveway, her stomach dropped. Her mailbox was smashed in, metal bent, wood splintered. Lying in the grass beside it was an empty dog bowl from her porch, cracked in half. Titan growled low in his throat. Sarah quickly scanned the street. No witnesses, no cameras she could see. She took a deep breath and walked inside, Titan sticking close to her leg. Just as she locked the door, a soft knock echoed from the front porch. Suspicious, she peered through the peephole. It was her next-door neighbor, James, a retired firefighter. He looked uneasy. "Hey," he said as she opened the door. "I didn't want to get in the middle, but I saw what happened." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "With the mailbox?" James nodded. "And the woman who did it?" "Let me guess," she said. "Pastel sweater, clipboard, smells like rules and perfume." James hesitated. "She came by last night, around midnight. Thought no one was watching." She was muttering to herself. Said something about setting an example and taking care of the problem before it spreads. Then she kicked the post until it broke. Sarah exhaled sharply. "Thank you, James." He hesitated again. "That's not all. I overheard her at the last HOA meeting. Said she was going to report the dog for aggression to get you evicted." Sarah blinked. "Wait, she's trying to fake a report?" James shrugged helplessly. "She's done it before. Last year, a family had a beagle that barked too much. Next thing they knew, a letter came in saying the dog had bitten a child. No proof. They moved out within a month." Sarah's mind was spinning. Titan had never harmed a soul. He was professionally trained, certified even. But Margaret wasn't interested in truth. She was playing a game, and she had home field advantage. That night, Sarah took action. She checked every corner of her house and yard for possible camera placements. With Titan at her side, she installed 2 motion-triggered security cameras, one pointed at the front porch, another at the street. She placed a third inside the flower bed, hidden under the petals of a fake plant. If Margaret wanted to play dirty, Sarah would start collecting receipts. Just as she screwed in the last mount, Titan perked up, his ears stiffened, head turning toward the street. Sarah froze. Across the road, in the shadows between 2 houses, stood Margaret. Not walking, not working, just watching. Their eyes locked for 3 chilling seconds before Margaret turned and disappeared behind a hedge. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Titan nudged her hand. "This woman thinks she can scare us," she whispered to him. "Let her try." But deep down, a knot tightened in her gut. Because Margaret wasn't just watching, she was planning. 3 days passed without incident. No notes, no smashed mailboxes, no Karen lurking in flower beds. But Sarah knew better than to think things had quieted. Silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. And she was right. On a crisp Thursday morning, Sarah opened her front door to a smell that hit her like a punch in the gut. Rotting meat. Titan gagged and backed up, whining softly. She looked around and spotted it, a brown paper bag dumped on the edge of her lawn, soaked through and swarming with flies. Inside were raw chicken wings and a shredded flyer from a local vet's clinic. Sarah's stomach twisted. "She's trying to bait him," she muttered, yanking Titan back inside. "And if he touches it, she'll say he's dangerous." It was a trap. Sarah bagged the mess with gloves, took photos, and stored everything in a sealed container, just in case she needed to prove it. Then she checked her cameras. Bingo! At 3:14 am, a figure, hooded, moving quickly, stepped onto her lawn and tossed the bag from the sidewalk. They never looked up, but the build, posture, and walk were unmistakable. It was Margaret. Sarah smirked. "Gotcha." But the victory was short-lived. That afternoon, while reviewing the footage frame by frame, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered, cautiously. "Hello, Miss Reynolds," a woman's voice asked, formal and clipped. "This is Denise from the County Animal Control Division. We've received a report of a large, aggressive canine off-leash in your neighborhood. There was mention of threatening behavior and potential injury to a child." Sarah's heart sank. "Excuse me. I'm required to inform you that we'll be conducting an inspection tomorrow. If the dog lacks proper certification or poses a risk, further action may be taken." "Who made the complaint?" "I can't disclose that, ma'am." But Sarah already knew. She hung up and sat in silence for a moment, staring at Titan, who was now lying calmly by the couch, eyes half closed, tail gently thumping. This was a dog that had once woken her up during a seizure, who could walk into a room full of strangers and not flinch. Aggressive? No. This was war. That night, she reviewed every camera angle, every file. But it wasn't enough anymore. Margaret wasn't just attacking her. She was trying to weaponize the system against her. She wanted Sarah gone, and she was laying the legal groundwork to do it. That's when Sarah made a decision. She reached into her filing cabinet and pulled out Titan's full federal documentation, his ADA registration, training history, ID tag copies, and legal exemption from local pet ordinances. She scanned them all into a digital folder titled Karen Evidence, Phase 1. She emailed it to her attorney and to her old friend Elena, now a civil rights officer with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The next day, as the animal control officer arrived, clipboard in hand, Margaret stood suspiciously nearby, pretending to trim her roses. Sarah opened the door, Titan sitting calmly at her heel, vest on, tags shining. The officer blinked. "Wow, he's very well behaved." Sarah handed over the folder of documents. The officer flipped through them, expression shifting from official to apologetic. "Everything checks out. We won't be pursuing anything further." Across the street, Margaret froze. Sarah smiled. "Actually, officer," she added, "I'd like to report something myself." Margaret's hedge clippers snapped in her hand. By the time the officer left, Sarah had one thing she didn't have before. Proof. Proof that Margaret was no longer just a nuisance, she was a threat. And the next move would be Sarah's. It was the community's annual HOA Fall Festival, hay bales, fake pumpkins, and forced smiles under string lights. Sarah hadn't planned to go, but Titan needed his routine walk, and the park was public space. Legally, she had every right to be there. So she clipped his leash, adjusted his vest, and walked straight down the sidewalk into enemy territory. The moment she stepped onto the grass, everything stopped. Children froze mid-laugh. Adults exchanged glances. And in the middle of the gazebo, wearing a floral scarf and that same ice-pick smile, stood Margaret. Sarah pretended not to notice. Titan moved calmly, unbothered, nose twitching at the scent of cinnamon and kettle corn. They made one slow lap around the booths, until a voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Excuse me," Margaret barked, striding forward with clipboard in hand. "You were told this animal is not permitted at community events." Sarah didn't even stop walking. "Federal law says otherwise." Margaret's smile curdled. "You can't just hide behind some phony badge and make people uncomfortable." Sarah turned slowly. "He's a registered service animal. You're the only one uncomfortable, Margaret." People nearby were starting to notice now. Phones in hand, curious stares. Margaret stepped closer. "I've warned you before. I've filed complaints. I've spoken to the board. And if no one else has the guts to do something about that beast, then I will." Titan stiffened. Sarah felt his tension immediately. Alert posture, ears up, eyes locked behind her. She turned, but it was too late. In one sudden, furious motion, Margaret lunged forward and slammed her clipboard down on Titan's back with a sharp crack. The crowd gasped. Titan didn't attack. He didn't even growl. He simply jerked back, startled, and stood in a defensive posture between Sarah and Margaret, teeth slightly bared, a quiet growl rumbling in his chest. Sarah stared at Margaret in disbelief. "Did you just hit my service dog?" Margaret's face twisted. "I was defending myself." "From what?" A dog standing still. You just committed a federal offense, you lunatic. Margaret flinched. Don't be ridiculous. People were filming now. From the crowd, Jane stepped forward. I saw the whole thing. You hit the dog without provocation. That's assault on a service animal. Someone else shouted. We got it on video. Margaret's mask cracked completely. He growled at me. He lunged. He did nothing until you hit him, Sarah snapped. And now, you're going to find out what real consequences look like. By the time the sheriff arrived, the story had already spread like wildfire. 3 witnesses gave statements. 4 neighbors showed their phone footage. Sarah handed over her full-service animal documentation again. Titan stood still the whole time, calm, silent, like a soldier on duty. The sheriff looked at Margaret, fuming red in the face and clutching her clipboard like a shield. Ma'am, he said, do you understand you just committed a federal crime under the Americans with Disabilities Act? Margaret stammered. It was just a tap. It doesn't matter. Interfering with a service animal, especially by force, is a serious offense. You could be facing charges. She paled. I suggest you call a lawyer, he added. Sarah stood nearby, arms crossed, Titan at her side. And I suggest, she said calmly, you resign from the HOA, because I'm not going anywhere. But you just burned your little kingdom to the ground. But this wasn't the end, because Margaret wasn't just facing charges. She was about to face something far worse. Federal investigators. And Sarah? She was just getting started. 2 days after the park incident, a black SUV rolled quietly into the neighborhood. It parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, unmarked but clearly official. Sarah watched through her living room window, Titan at her feet, his ears twitching. 2 agents stepped out, badges clipped to their belts. They weren't local cops. These were federal. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Elena, her contact at the VA. They're there. 8A Civil Rights Division. You did the right thing. Let me know how it goes. She exhaled slowly. Showtime. Across the street, Margaret's door opened. She stepped out in a cream-colored sweater and pearls, looking confused, then immediately flustered as the agents approached her. Sarah didn't need audio. The body language said it all. Hands gesturing, head shaking. The point-blank stare of a woman who thought she was untouchable, being told she wasn't. Then came the words that hit harder than any clipboard. You are now under investigation for assaulting a federally protected service animal. Margaret froze. One agent handed her a document. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Her lips moved. Protest, excuse, denial. The agents didn't budge. Word spread like wildfire. By that evening, the HOA Facebook page was in chaos. Screenshots, videos, angry threads. A post from James Reed. It's time we talk about leadership that targets disabled veterans and lies to enforce personal vendettas. Dozens of neighbors chimed in. Some confessed they'd always feared Margaret's grip on the HOA board. Others revealed stories of her bullying tactics, sudden fines, anonymous complaints, and forced removals. One post stood out. Margaret fined us $300 for non-compliant mailbox paint, while her mailbox had chipped paint and a wasp nest. The tide was turning. The next morning, Sarah found a sealed envelope taped to her front door. The paper was trembling slightly when she opened it. Dear Ms. Reynolds, effective immediately, Margaret Green has been suspended from all HOA duties pending investigation. We deeply regret the recent events and are reviewing community policy to ensure ADA compliance and fair treatment for all residents. Sincerely, Tom Delgado, Interim HOA President. Sarah smiled. Guess the Queen just got dethroned. Titan let out a small bark, tail wagging once. Later that day, Margaret made one last move. She stood in front of Sarah's house, dressed not in pearls, but a faded coat and dark glasses. She wasn't alone. A man in a suit stood beside her, her attorney. Sarah stepped onto the porch with Titan. Margaret took a breath. I was advised to offer a public apology. Sarah crossed her arms. Too late. I didn't know it was. I didn't mean to. No, Sarah cut in, her voice firm. You did know. You just thought no one would stop you. Titan sat at her heel, silent and still, the symbol of everything Margaret tried to break, and failed. Her lawyer cleared his throat. My client would like to offer restitution and reach a civil agreement. Sarah raised a hand. You can stop right there. I'm not interested in a settlement. I'm interested in accountability. She turned and walked back inside, door clicking shut behind her. Inside, Sarah sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. She began writing an op-ed titled, When HOA Power Becomes Abuse, How My Service Dog Took Down a Bully. She attached the footage, the police report, and her statement, and hit send. It was picked up in less than 48 hours. By Monday morning, Sarah's inbox was exploding. Her op-ed had been picked up by a major military advocacy blog overnight, then shared by a well-known disability rights influencer. Within hours, it leaped to the front page of Reddit, /justice served, /public freakout, and then the big one. Karen HOA started trending on Twitter. The title said it all. Veteran service dog assaulted by HOA president. Justice is coming. Underneath, the article detailed everything. Margaret's history of harassment, the video of the park incident, the police report, and even a few blurred screenshots of previous HOA warnings she had issued over trivial issues like overgrown dandelions. The comments were relentless. This Karen messed with the wrong veteran. Imagine assaulting a service dog and thinking you'll get away with it. She brought a clipboard to a federal crime. By noon, Sarah's doorbell rang. This time, it wasn't another HOA notice. It was a local news crew. Ms. Reynolds, we love to ask a few questions. Your story's inspiring people. She hesitated, then glanced at Titan, calm and poised, his vest freshly brushed. He was ready. All right, let's do it. That night, the news segment aired, a respectful, heartfelt piece showing Sarah's quiet strength and Titan's loyalty. The footage of Margaret's attack blurred only enough to meet network standards, but not enough to protect her from recognition. Within hours, Margaret's Facebook profile vanished. Then came the fallout. A Change.org petition to remove Margaret permanently from the HOA board hit 10,000 signatures in 2 days. Another group, the Veteran Canine Defense League, announced they were investigating similar cases and offered to sponsor Sarah's legal expenses as she pursued charges. But the real bombshell came midweek. A whistleblower from the HOA board leaked emails, dozens of them, showing that Margaret had a long history of weaponizing HOA rules against veterans, minorities, and single mothers. One subject line read, Too many pit bulls moving in, time to tighten leash rules. Another, That woman with the flagpole, make sure she gets a warning. The emails leaked on Reddit, then crossed to Twitter, then made it to national media. Margaret wasn't just a local tyrant. She was a symbol of something bigger, and the world was watching. Sarah's phone rang. It was her lawyer. She's cornered, he said. We can pursue criminal charges, civil damages, even force an injunction to bar her from HOA participation for life. Sarah thought for a moment. She wasn't after vengeance, but she was after something else. A message. She'd attacked a service dog in broad daylight, she said. That alone deserves prosecution. But this is about every person she's ever bullied. Her lawyer nodded. Then we go full steam, and we bring the whole machine down. Meanwhile, Margaret's life unraveled. Her employer, a local insurance agency, placed her on indefinite leave after angry calls flooded their front desk. Her house was egged twice. Reporters knocked daily. And worst of all for her, the HOA board, under community pressure, voted unanimously to remove her from all leadership roles. She was no longer Madam President. She was just another resident. A resident under federal investigation. That night, as Sarah walked Titan, under the same lights where he'd once been attacked, something felt different. Not safer, not calmer, but lighter. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't the one being watched. She was the one watching. And Margaret? She was finally out of moves. The neighborhood had shifted. Conversations whispered behind closed doors. Phones no longer rang with friendly greetings, but with urgent questions about the unfolding scandal. Margaret, once the unshakable queen of the HOA, was now a shadow moving furtively through the streets, her eyes flickering with panic. But just when Sarah thought the storm had passed, a new ripple appeared. It started with a text message, anonymously sent. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Sarah's heart skipped. She showed the message to Elena, who frowned. "That's intimidation," Elena said sharply. "It's illegal, especially given the circumstances. You should report this." Sarah hesitated. The message was clear. Margaret, or someone loyal to her, was still trying to scare her into silence. But Sarah wasn't the type to back down. She replied, "I'm not afraid." The next morning, a package arrived at Sarah's door. Inside was a photo. Titan, sitting calmly in the park. But behind him, blurry, was a figure with a raised hand. And the message, "We're watching. One more step, and this ends badly." Sarah's stomach dropped. Her first instinct was fear. But then Titan looked up, eyes steady and unwavering, as if saying, "I've got this." She took a deep breath and dialed her lawyer. That afternoon, Sarah met with her attorney and Elena at a local cafe. "We have to consider protective measures," her lawyer said, "restraining orders, possibly involving federal authorities for harassment and threats." Elena nodded. "There's more." I dug deeper into Margaret's background. She has a history of aggressive behavior beyond the HOA. Assault charges from a decade ago, a restraining order filed by a former neighbor. Sarah's eyes widened. "Why didn't anyone stop her sooner?" "That's the thing," Elena said softly. "People were afraid, but not Sarah. She was done living in fear." Back at home, Sarah's phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. Margaret's voice, cold and shaking. "You think you've won? You haven't. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me. You and that dog are going to lose everything." Sarah felt a chill, but she pressed play again, recording the message for evidence. Then, something unexpected happened. The following week, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting, not to discuss Margaret, but to publicly denounce any harassment against Sarah and Titan. Tom Delgado, the interim president, spoke with quiet authority. "We stand with Sarah Reynolds. We will not tolerate threats or violence in this community. Anyone who attempts to intimidate will face legal consequences." The room erupted in applause. Neighbors approached Sarah afterward, offering apologies and support. The tide had turned. Days later, Margaret was served with multiple restraining orders, not only barring her from contacting Sarah and Titan, but from attending any HOA meetings or community events. The federal investigation escalated. Margaret's lawyer called, trying to negotiate a settlement. Sarah's response was firm. No deals, no silence, no mercy. Late one evening, as Sarah and Titan walked the quiet street, the usual tension lingered, but so did something new. Hope. For every threat, every attack, every dark moment, Sarah had found strength. Not just in the law or her lawyer, but in her community and in Titan. And she knew, deep down, this fight was about more than one dog or one woman. It was about standing up, about justice, about never backing down. The day arrived with a quiet tension hanging over the neighborhood like a thick fog. Sarah sat in the packed courtroom, Titan resting calmly by her side, his presence a reminder of the battle fought and the victory within reach. Margaret sat across the room, pale and withdrawn, flanked by her attorney. The woman who once ruled the HOA with an iron fist was now reduced to a defendant facing serious federal charges. The judge's voice rang clear. "Margaret Green, you stand accused of violating the Americans with Disabilities Act by assaulting a federally protected service animal, harassment, and intimidation of a community member." Margaret's lawyer shifted uneasily. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos, witness statements, emails, even the chilling threats Margaret had sent. The judge paused, eyes locking onto Margaret. This court takes these offenses seriously. Service animals are protected by federal law because they are essential to the independence and well-being of their handlers. Margaret's lips trembled. No defense left. Outside the courtroom, the neighborhood gathered in support of Sarah. Neighbors who had once feared Margaret's reign now stood openly by her side. James, the neighbor who filmed the initial attack, clapped Sarah on the back. "You did it. You made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else." Sarah smiled, tears brimming. "This wasn't just about me or Titan," she said. "It's about every person who's ever felt powerless against bullies who misuse authority." In the following weeks, Margaret was sentenced to community service, mandatory sensitivity training, and barred from any HOA involvement permanently. The HOA board passed new policies, led by Sarah's recommendations, to protect residents' rights and ensure compliance with disability laws. Margaret's legacy wasn't destruction. It was a cautionary tale. But the biggest surprise came one quiet afternoon when a letter arrived for Sarah. Inside was an invitation from the National Service Animal Foundation. They wanted to feature Titan and Sarah in their upcoming campaign promoting service dog awareness and veterans' rights. Sarah's heart swelled. Titan had become more than a protector. He was a symbol of justice and resilience. As Sarah walked Titan through the neighborhood park, now a place of peace, not conflict, she noticed something new. Children playing freely, neighbors chatting warmly, and on the community bulletin board, a bright flyer. Annual Service Dog Awareness Walk. Join us. Sarah looked down at Titan, who wagged his tail. "We did it, boy." And in that moment, Sarah knew their fight had changed more than just their neighborhood. It had changed hearts.